Fabula Ultima is one of my favourite games. I love the tone, the rules, the look of the books, everything. So I was really excited to check out its spiritual predecessor, Ryuutama. And to spoil the rest of the review, it did not disappoint. In fact, it was something far more than I'd realised and impressed me far more than I'd expected. Ryuutama is a Japanese table talk game translated into English in 2016. It sells itself as a natural or rustic fantasy game about travelling, Hayao Miyazaki's Oregon Trail. I don't think that marketing really does the game justice. If I were marketing this game, I'd focus on its very unique collaborative mechanics like GM classes and shared world building and the simple joy of discovering new communities, picking up quests from the jobs board and leaving the place brighter than when you found it. I'd describe it as very much like Octopath Traveler, the video game series, in tone and feel. But let's take a closer look. The physical version is an absolute joy to read. It's a really high quality but not too expensive hardback with beautiful watercolour style illustrations, lovely colours and an easy to read layout. The book is split into 4 sections. The Book of Spring, which covers PC creation, the Book of Summer that covers rules, the Book of Autumn, which covers GM character creation. If that sounds odd, trust me, we'll get to that. And the Book of Winter, which is a decently sized bestiary. In Ryuutama, your setting is created collaboratively by all players at the table. You can do this in Session 0 if you like, using a world creation worksheet, or you can start with a blank sheet and some general fantasy tropes and see where it leads you. There is a basic framework to start from. The world was created by 4 types of seasonal dragons, who created 30 types of terrain and weather dragons. The presence of a dragon shapes the world. The land might dry and dunes rise when a sand dragon makes their nest nearby. Cloud and rain dragons are always accompanied by rainstorms. Mountains might rise around an alpine dragon, and a swamp might gather around muck dragons. As an aside here, I can't express enough how much I love these unique dragon designs laid out like sketches in a naturalist's notebook. Now, there is another category of dragon, Ryujin, 4 flavours of guardian spirits that care for the young seasonal dragons, and to grow, seasonal dragons eat travel logs. And so, whatever your world is like, there are certain truths that everyone will feel the call to journey at some point in their lives. Their communities facilitate this tradition, looking after everything they leave behind while they travel. The road can be dangerous though. Monsters roam, terrain and weather changes in an instant, mischievous neko-goblins harass travellers, so you'll need to be familiar with at least one weapon. Another part of the tradition is that folks post quests on job boards in every tavern, asking for a traveller's expertise in dealing with a monster problem, investigating strange goings-on, or maybe just helping on the farm. You might have requested the aid of travellers yourself in the past. And now it's time to return the favour. Beyond those assumptions though, the world is yours to create and discover together. Once you've sketched out your setting, it's time to create your characters. You'll pick a class. These are generally mundane backgrounds like merchant, farmer, or noble. and they grant certain skills based on the experiences you had before you started your journey. And then you pick a type, fighter, technical, or magic, that determines how you'll approach problem solving on your travels. The magic type additionally chooses a seasonal magic type that they can pick spells from, so it's reasonable to say there's more like 6 types than 3, 4 kinds of spellcaster, a martial type, and a utility type. And I've buried the lead here because one of the most fascinating aspects about this process is the character the GM creates. Remember the Ryujin caretakers? Well, this is the GM's character. The Ryujin's job is to guide the travellers through a story to generate a narrative worthy to present to a seasonal dragon. To do that, the GM picks one of 4 classes that grant traits and abilities that are best suited to fostering a certain kind of story. This is probably best decided by the group because it essentially signals what kind of story you'll be focusing on, and might even slightly alter the base rules of the game. The Green Dragon has abilities that focus on journeys. The Azure Dragon is about interpersonal relationships. The Crimson Dragon is focused on combat and acts of bravery. And the Black Dragon introduces darker themes of intrigue and revenge. There's essentially 3 aspects to the Ryujin character. Artifacts that subtly alter the rules to suit the kind of narrative the group wants to experience. Benedictions, which are abilities and boons that reward certain kinds of play or throw a spanner in the works. And reveils, which are the more powerful direct influences of the Ryujin and tend to involve them revealing one of their forms to the players. You get a free benediction slot to use once per adventure. Generally, that'll be at the beginning to set the tone. Otherwise, the Ryujin has a small pool of life points that they can spend on benedictions and the more costly reveils. If they run out of life points though, the Ryujin dies. That might seem a bit strange if you're used to the GM being an invisible referee, so let's imagine an example. The group decides it'd be fun to play as a newly formed touring band of musicians. Maybe they make an all-minstrel party and vary their party roles using the type feature. The bassist and percussionists might team up to make tough frontline fighter types. The guitarists each make a spellcaster, one winter-themed, one summer. And the lead singer makes a trickster technical type. The GM likes the idea and asks the group if they prefer an adventure story or one more about relationships. The group decides they'd like to explore the relationships between their band members, so the GM picks the Azure Dragon Ryujin and asks the group whether they'd like a reduced risk of dying or for the Ryujin to accompany them on their adventure. The party decides it'd be fun to have the Ryujin accompany them as a mascot, let's say a blue jay. After a bit of time, the Blue Jay Band are developing their relationships as they tour around. The 2 guitarists have been flirting, and the GM decides to slot the benediction Tale of Love, which grants any player who is in love a +1 bonus to their armour. And they plan a particularly difficult combat encounter, spending an LP on the Elite Enemy Benediction. The GM hopes this will lead to a dramatic declaration of love at the perfect moment. It goes exactly to plan, and in a tense and dramatic moment, one character confesses their love. Only, there's a problem. The fight is too tough. Most of the players are downed well into negative hit points, and one of them is bound to be killed. The GM has 2 LP remaining, so checks their options. They could use the Rewind Time Benediction, but that would undo the dramatic declaration and wouldn't make the fight any easier. And so, As the fateful blow is about to fall, the GM spends their remaining LP on Protection of the Dragon. To everyone's shock, the Blue Jay reveals its true form, a powerful azure dragon, and takes the blow, giving the players enough time to rally and win. But after the combat, the players realize the Blue Jay is gone, its life force spent in that moment of protection. It won't be accompanying them anymore. But somewhere, a different Ryujin views the scene and decides to watch this group with a little more interest. We're using a step dice system for our rolls here, so we have 3 different arrays of die sizes which we assign to strength, dexterity, intelligence, and spirit. A check involves picking 2 relevant stats and rolling both of the associated dice. So, for example, if I have a d6 in strength and a d8 in dexterity, then climbing a tree might involve rolling both of those, but moving stealthily might be 2 d8s for dexterity and dexterity again. I always enjoy systems like that because it doesn't punish playing against type too much. You can also concentrate to gain a +1 bonus to your roll by spending mind points, but be aware you will faint if your MP drops to 0. A really interesting rule that makes travelling sections more dynamic is the condition roll. At the start of every day, you roll a strength and spirit check to gain a condition score, how well or energetic you feel today. Getting 10 or higher boosts your choice of ability score for that day, and getting 2 does the opposite. But regardless, you need to note down your condition because it also represents your susceptibility to status effects. Having a higher condition makes it more likely for you to shrug off negative status effects. As you travel, you also make journey checks along the way that prompt little events. The difficulty, of course, depends on what kind of dragons are nearby. Now, the book acknowledges that it would be easy to fall into a bad habit of just rolling the checks for the day and not narrating the outcome, and it advises against that, but I think it could benefit from some narrative prompts for successes and failures. Combat has a really neat narrative mechanic though, which is objects. The first thing you do when a fight breaks out is establish what interactable objects are present on the scene. Using an object grants a bonus to your next check and erases the object from the list. If you run out of objects, you can use the search action to discover something new. I love that mechanic. It's a really simple and elegant way to bring the environment to life during combat scenes and encourage creative role-playing. This is a really pedantic nitpick, but I think it's worth mentioning. There are 2 sample scenarios in the GM section, and rather than showing the GM how to run scenarios, they're a bit more focused on teaching you how to use the provided worksheets. There's the scenario cultivation sheet, the scenario target sheet, the town creation sheet, and 4 event sheets, 1 for each story beat of the session. Personally, I don't think planning a session of Ryuutama really involves quite that much paperwork. It might put new GMs off or even stifle their improvisation. That's not to say these worksheets can't be useful. If you're stuck for ideas, templates like these can be helpful. And there's lots of potentially usable sheets in the back, on top of character sheets and session planning sheets. Although, mildly annoyingly in the physical book, the combat tracker is bound to the back page. Every so often, I look at a game that challenges my preconceptions, and Ryuutama is one of them. I assumed it was published around 2016, but that was only the English translation. The Japanese version was apparently available in 2007. That really surprised me. Ryuutama feels much more modern with its collaborative world building and GM abilities. I'd assumed that these kind of GM mechanics evolved in the mid-2010s after Apocalypse World popularized the idea of GM moves. That may be because of my ignorance, or it could be that Ryuutama is just a really innovative game. It's probably both. There are some mildly outdated aspects, like the carrying capacity, but to be fair, the book does say you can ignore that. There are also some food and water tracking mechanics, which I'm not usually a fan of, but it's not overly punitive, and does provide a little incentive to get to the next settlement sooner rather than later. I'm so glad I finally checked out Ryuutama, and I can easily see it becoming one of my favourites. I'd like to try out an idea with it, a solo campaign inspired by Kino's journey, but playing solo does mean missing out on one of its unique features, one that fascinates me so much, the Ryujin. And so, sadly, I think to fully appreciate this game, I'll need to get a group together to play it with. And that, of course, is the real challenge of any RPG. I've decided to be a little less coy about the games in my queue. This pile is very likely to change and have new games added to it, but these are the kinds of titles I'll be covering in the near future. I like to take my time with reviews and spend a couple of weeks immersed in the game beforehand, ideally playing it if possible. So generally I release a new review every fortnight, and for the weeks between, I've started a really exciting new project, a solo play of my new favourite game, Midnight Muscadines. Now, I know not everyone will jump with excitement at the sound of a solo actual play, but I've been so happy with the feedback. So I hope you'll indulge me and stick around for just a 30-second teaser trailer at the end of this video so you can decide if you'd like to check it out. As always, thank you so much to this month's Ko-fi supporters. If you'd like to and feel able to support the channel as well, please head over to ko-fi.com/cozyrpgreviews. Thank you so much for watching, and now that 30-second trailer. I need you to fetch a library book, Novice Titch. Oh, sure. Off you go then. We have to get 5 or more, or this campaign could end quite early. Titch draws the frosted blade and leaps towards the darkness. That's a 12.